Okay, issue 3, compensation from China.
As the nation and the world continue to grapple with the health, economic, and societal costs of the coronavirus pandemic, some say the Chinese Communist regime must pay up. They say Beijing failed to adequately warn the world of the coronavirus outbreak when it first occurred in November 2019. China did indeed block international scientists from entering Wuhan City and argued against travel bans. And note this, with a new bill, Republican Senator Josh Hawley sought this week to create a private right of legal action against the Chinese government by removing China's sovereign immunity as pertaining to coronavirus-related lawsuits.
Clarence, how do you see this playing out? Do you think Senator Josh Hawley's bill has any chance of earning Democratic support in the House?
I don't think so right now because the situation is changing. I understand Hawley's sentiments, though, behind this because a lot of people are upset with China. There's still a question of how much does China have to do with initiating this virus, or did the virus occur naturally? That's still being investigated. And there's a general sense that who do you sue? Really, the frustration here is over the lack of preparation, the lack of warning. And I think that needs to be investigated and isn't going to be solved in a lawsuit or a bill that supports that kind of legal action.
Okay.
It's not a perfect analogy, but the 9/11 families have spent years in courtrooms trying to get financial compensation from Saudi Arabia. Now, the subsequent governments have been friendly to Saudi Arabia, so nobody has really wanted to push that. And because we don't have a lot of friends in the Middle East, nobody wanted to tilt that balance. But they won various lawsuits, but they've never been able to get anywhere financially. And it's a different relationship with China, but I just don't see this whizzing through Congress because there's too much at stake here. And right now, China is trying to create goodwill by helping out its doctors are helping out in other countries, and you've got President Trump, who has been very praiseful of President Xi, and even at the time when he says the World Health Organization was being too China-centric, you can run clips of President Trump right there saying all the same things and saying that China is remarkably transparent and that they've been doing a great job. So Trump has other fish to fry with China, the trade agreement. He still hopes they're going to buy all those soybeans. So I don't think this is going to go anywhere. It's great talking.
Tom, is a matter of justice and morality. There's no question that the American people and the people of the world have a case against the Chinese who appear to have engaged in a criminal conspiracy to cover up a crisis that was unleashed on the world, and it will end up killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. However, the argument from sovereign immunity, I don't know that case is going to get anywhere, but this is the major issue. In the big campaign this fall, China is front and center as an issue. And I think the Republican Party now, belatedly, and the conservatives are going to take a much tougher line on China than the Democratic Party. And I think politically, Trump will even be forced somewhat in that position himself. And I think it's a political winner, undeniably. I don't think there's any wild enthusiasm for Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party in the United States today.
Right.
For who? With all those clips out there of Trump praising China.
But there's a difference is that people understand how Trump speaks in the sense that he praises everybody and then he takes it back 30 seconds later. I don't think that it necessarily sticks. But I think that when you
look, he's on both sides of every issue. In other words,
well, you know what? It works for some people. I think that with President Trump, you're seeing the fact that Peter Navarro has taken a much bigger position inside the White House. You're seeing his transition on China. Navarro is a China hawk and has been for a very, very long time. I don't know if Hawley's bill is going to go anywhere because Hawley has a tendency to look at 2024 or 2028 in his position to run for president more than he does actually getting legislation across the finish line. But I do think there is momentum to get China to compensate some way, whether it be demanding that they forgive the debt that they hold upon us, the $1.1 trillion in debt that they have of ours, or some other opportunity. But China has handled this. I mean, China was literally given donations from Italy and to deal with the coronavirus early on, and then they resold those donations back to Italy later on. I mean, they handled a lot of medical equipment that was defunct. I think the world, not just the United States, but the world is going to demand something from China.
Let's see what President Trump, the great deal maker, does with it, because he's had a burr under his saddle for China for about 20 years now. But he talks tougher than he actually acts. So I don't really expect him to get that militant when push comes to shove.
Right. And I don't think there's a lot of moral ground for the president to stand on, because he basically refused to acknowledge what a serious threat this was for quite a long period of time.
He didn't engage in a criminal conspiracy to keep it quiet
for that.
and let it be cut loose. But I just, again, you think of the comment. We've got a situation in the United States as we're going to have to really table this issue of China. And the real question is, are we going to enter a second Cold War with the Chinese like we had with the Russians and the Soviets under Stalin and Khrushchev and Brezhnev? Or are we going to have sort of a détente and an engagement with China? And I think that question is still very much on the table. And a lot of what's happened recently and what's happening, frankly, in the South China Sea and elsewhere are making it really possible. You could have a real second Cold War and sort of a decoupling.
Let's see who comes up with a vaccine first.
Well,
if it's China, there's no new Cold War.
Well, I think that also maybe you're seeing a reposturing towards China by especially people who have been free traders for the last 30, 40 years who said we need to open up regular markets to China and treat China like we treat every other nation on earth. China is we have a special relationship to China that needs to be recognized, how serious of a threat they are, not to just to the United States, but to the entire world. And I mean, not just the coronavirus. Look at the last 4 major diseases that hit the world, most of which came out of China, and China's inability to handle. I mean, China's reopened wet markets already. This is nuts. And I think that we're going to sit there and realize China needs a special relationship, and our warmth to China and our relationship as our creditor and as the provider of raw materials and as the producer of our manufacturing, some of that is going to change, and they're going to demand change, even if it's just changing supply lines, even if it's just bringing some of that manufacturing back.
Let me ask Pat a question. Pat, let me ask you, do you think, to Eleanor's point, because of the, quite frankly, lack of regulatory standards in China as compared to the United States, their vaccine testing is months ahead of where we are in terms of the human testing? If China, by the fall later on in the year, has a vaccine that appears to be working across demographics, do you think that is their way to rebuild their position in the world? Because surely then everyone's going to say, well, we want some of that.
Well, I think if China found the vaccine for the coronavirus, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that would be a huge coup d'etat for the communist Chinese, and they should get it to the world, and I'm sure they wouldn't take credit for it. But as of right now, Tom, this thing stinks to high heaven, and it's sitting right there on the plate of Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, and they're still lying about it and locking people up and not letting them talk. And I think there's going to be a real digging up of the sources and origins of all this, and it's not going to look good for the Chinese. And I think the world is going to have to then, as Ryan said, take a look and say, what exactly are we dealing with there in Beijing?
But it's not going to be enough to detract from the president's role in handling this from when he first learned about it.
It's not. It's apples and oranges.
Donald Trump was not in Wuhan.
Very active here on part of the Trumpites.
It's not the same thing even remotely.
All right, so let's let Clarence in.
I was going to say, Donald Trump is a lot tougher on the Chinese government than he is on President Xi. He likes him like he likes other autocrats. And will this be an issue in the election? I doubt it. Americans are not into foreign policy, and we may argue a lot about China, but I don't think the election is going to turn on it.
But even George Soros, even George Soros praised Trump's handling of China and getting tough on China. I mean, Trump has been different on China than our last three presidents have. And let's look at the last year under Xi Jinping. You have the arrests of Muslims in China. You have the Hong Kong protests, and then you have the coronavirus. It's not like Xi Jinping was, Justin Trudeau, and then the coronavirus happened.
Tell President Trump that. Tell President Trump that. He hasn't been tough on Xi.
President Trump has been enormously tough on Xi Jinping over the course of the last 3 years, much different than Obama, Clinton, and Bush.
No.
He who imposed tariffs on China.
Absolutely.
Everybody else has been. China had a $400 billion trade surplus under Republicans and Democrats alike till Trump came along.
And he's trying to tell us that those tariffs are all going into the pockets of the farmers. Big lie.
But it hurt China.
Who's selling the soybeans?
One at a time. Pat and then Ryan.
Who's selling the soybeans?
All right, Ryan.
But to say that the tariffs did not hurt the Chinese economy is preposterous, and to say that he hasn't started to crack down on them taking our technology, and his whole posture on China is extremely significant. That has not happened under Obama or Bush or Clinton. This is a transformational president in terms of China, and it's been Republicans and Democrats who are Chinese hawks who have realized this.
Okay, Eleanor, 20 seconds.
Transformational president for China.
Okay.
Tell the Uyghurs that.
On China.
All right. That was a good discussion.